Hi. So, in the previous video, we started to talk about Madelinie Sophie Barat, and we talked about her name, that it means of Magdala, a small village in Israel, and we talked about, the lines, made line, and we talked about the surname Barat, right? It can stand about for art being performed in the bar, and that stands for three smaller places in Afghanistan, in Indonesia, and in India. Okay. So today I wanted to tell you about. Oh, all right. Oh my. Oh my. Just bear with me a minute because I think I have. Yay. Um, I have mistaken the topics for today because we have talked about the Snow White and we have talked about Madelinie Sophie Barat and what will be the next topic? Unbelievable. Well, yay. Oh, yay. Okay, so sorry, just because of the live event, I put the content from the storyline I was following in the different order, probably more comprehensive order, and therefore I got mixed up. Like, wow, which topic is gonna go today? So as we talked about Madelinie Sophie Barat, then we should discuss the creation of. Um, Sacred Care schools, but I have already made a video on that, the link with dwarfs and so on. So I think I will move on to Carmelite Order, but because that's the next topic. Yeah, and that's the next topic in the text that I have written that I'm using for our meetings on Tuesday. I hope you are there. Okay. And here we go with Carmelite Order. Why do we go all the time with nuns? Because, well, Madeleine, written by Ludwig Bemelmans, is a story about uh, girls who live in boarding school that is run by nun, and then Madeleine Sophie Barat. It's also a story about the creation of schools for girls that possibly have some connections to creation of dames and escort. How did I jump over? I have changed the order. I'm still thinking about it. Well, and then 12th century hermits, Carmelite. um, yeah, today is just the best day of my life, and I'm so prepared. 10 minutes, and for 10 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about Carmelite Order because the introduction was so long. I'm so sorry. Okay, so it starts with Mount Carmel found in Israel, and it starts with Moraka Castle that is placed on that mountain. And from Arabic language, that Muraka Castle means the place of burning. And the story starts with the story of creation in the 12th century. Carmelite order is connected with Prophet Eliash, who was the first one to to challenge other prophets to see whose deity was a true God. And in the 12th century, Carmelite order was created, and then in the 16th century, there was a reform introduced by Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, and they introduced a simpler way of life, and that Carmelite order was called discalced. That means shoeless, shoeless Carmelites. And in the USA, you have about 60 monasteries and convents together, with Carmelite order and shoeless Carmelite orders. And I lived with Carmelite nuns when I was a stripper in Krakow. And when I lived with them, I had an adventure with the washing machine because it actually eaten up my lovely dress, black dress that I got from my sister. And then, I had a conversation about it with my best friend, and she told me that the girls basically wanted to buy a new washing machine, but the nuns didn't agree for that because the Mother Superior would say that such a washing machine would take too much electricity and water. And the type of a washing machine, Frania, that we had seems to be the washing machine that actually took a lot of water. And as I worked as a stripper when actually living with the nuns, then Mother Superior, possibly it was her, I don't know, somebody took my razor, and when I lived there, I also asked my best friend about the diaries, what to do with them, because I suspected that the Mother Superior would go and do some checkups on the rooms. So, during the time I lived there, that was summertime. So we were basically like three of us, me, Natalia, Kasica, maybe somebody else too, but I had the entire floor for myself. So, so I asked her, what does she do? And she told me that she wraps her private things into, with a paper, and she pretends that this is a gift for her mom, and she signs it for mom. And then she goes like, well, Mother Superior probably wouldn't like to check on the gift for the mom, right? She wouldn't be curious about it, right? Yeah. And she also asked Mother Superior if she could leave her bike in the corridor, but she couldn't. So, during that time, I told Mother Superior that I was a waitress. I didn't tell her the truth, like where exactly I worked and what exactly I did. So I got the extra pair of keys, because other than that, you could just, face I think it was 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock that the door was closed for the night and you couldn't enter. So, I also smoked cigarettes there, and I would throw them away on the roof of the car. And when I went down and even thought about just, removing those evidence of smoking, then the car was just too tall and I couldn't reach the roof. So Mother Superior finally told me to move out, but basically when she told me to move out, there was also a scene that when I was just crossing by, and I heard her yelling, like she was yelling, she wouldn't move out, she this, she that, and I just listened for a while, and I got stunned that she most probably was telling that story about me. So I got worried, and I think this was really, immature and weird behavior on her part. So Carmelite order was opened in Poland by Saint Jadwiga of Poland and Władysław II Jagiełło. And I tell you that story because I think nuns had a lot to do with possibly shaping escorts, and stories that I have mentioned by Ludwig Bemelmans, and the story of Sophie Madelinie Barat is also mentioned in the in the book, and I just found a lot of references from these books to my life. So I think they are not irrelevant. And I see the link between, the Native Americans and the food. So I will move on to talking about them. But probably when we do a larger span of that material, then you will see the connection. Not just yet, because today, sorry, I got mixed up with the order of what goes when. So let me just give you a little bit of an introduction on Native Americans, like what do we know about them, just a little bit. So they basically lived in dense woods in, Iroquois, Cherokees, and Potawatomi tribes lived in dense woods in the USA, but they also lived in other places in the US too, like in Great Plains, in deserts, in mountains, in lakes and rivers, and um, there are many other tribes there, but I'm not giving you the names because I probably will have some issues with pronunciation. So Indian wars started in the early 16th and late 19th century, and there were massacres like Sand Creek Massacre and Wounded Knee Massacre, and corn was central parts of diet and agriculture for Native Americans. So cornfields were basically destroyed during that war. Most of the time they would be destroyed by fire because that was the easiest and fastest way to go about it. In that way, the land would be left unusable for the season, and the Native Americans would be forced to relocate and move to another region. And during those wars, back then there were about 50 or 100 million of Americans, and during those wars they just died of starvation, of exposure to diseases that they were not familiar with, diseases brought by settlers, and they also died during the relocation and during battles. So currently there is 1 million of Native Americans living in reservoirs in the USA. But we learn from Gigi, from artificial intelligence, that we learn that um, there are more Native Americans than just 1 million, because that's 1 million in reservoirs, but they also live in some rural areas of the USA. But still, from 50 millions of people or 100 millions of people, when you are left with about 1 or 2 million of them, then that's really stunning. So how is that linked to karma? Well, the link is in the company Mars, but first I'll just walk you through some, still other events from other events related to Native Americans, because Thomas Berger was the one who described he described some battles and wars from that period, and he described the story from the perspective of the story of a man who was born who was raised by Native Americans, and he would be sometimes fighting with them against American settlers, and sometimes he would go and take the side of American settlers and fight against Native Americans. So it will be he would be changing the sides quite so often in the book. So the story was quite dynamic. It was quite dynamic. But they also write about the Battle of the Little Big Horn that was won on June 25th and 26th in the 1876. So it was led by the Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse on the parts of Native Americans, and American settlers were led by George Armstrong Glaster. and that battle was won for Native Americans. And the link with the food is in the surname of the man who actually wrote the book. Thomas Berger wrote the book, and when I worked for McDonald's, I was selling burgers, and there was also one more sandwich that I think is linked. Let me just see the time. So there's one more sandwich linked with. I'm sorry, just okay. Sandwich that I think is, may bring in mind some associations with the forest and wintertime, woodsman. So we were selling a sandwich called Woodsman, and during that war, there was not only Colonel George Armstrong Custer who fought in that war, but there was also Philip Sheridan, and Sheridan is also Irish liqueur that is, has got this dual bottle that's black and white, black for coffee liqueur and white for chocolate vanilla. So Thomas Sheridan and Sons introduced that liqueur in 1994. And we have yet another person that is somehow involved with the story and key moments for Native Americans. And that person's surname stands for food, right? Like Thomas Berger, who writes about Native Americans, is Berger, and burgers are at McDonald's. I think there is one more thing I wanted to point out here, that's popcorn. So as you know, popcorn fields were quite often burned during that war to deprive these people of food supplies. And we have popcorn that is fried corn, right? So we associate popcorn with the movies, with going to the movies and, watching a film, right? Or watching a movie. So I see the connection with, the pronunciation of popcorn and pornography, because it seems like these two words are close to each other when you think about the way they sound. So popcorn and pornography, and there is also a horse and a whore, and there is also beach and bitch, and there is also the doll Skipper, younger sister of Barbie, and stripper. Skipper, stripper, whore, horse, beach, bitch, popcorn, porn. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think there might be this connection. And when we think about Mars bar that was introduced by Forrest Mars, then when we think about the planet Mars, we think about the war, we think about action, we think about Roman mythology and Roman god Mars. So we think about red and we think about green when we think about Forrest Mars, and he was the guy who introduced the biscuit, the bar, and that bar is consists of 3 parts: caramel, nougat, and chocolate. So caramel is the color of the skin of Native Americans. It's probably not only the color of Native Americans. There will be some other nations with that color, I presume, too. But just when I ask artificial intelligence for the photo, and yeah, I think that's their color, And nougat is made. So nougat is made of, let me see, nougat, sugar, honey, white eggs, white, and almonds, hazelnuts, and pistachios. And almonds, hazelnuts, and pistachios are found in the region of Amazon, and the region of Amazon is also inhabited by Native Americans. And in Amazon, you can also find, obviously, Brazilian nut that's very typical for Amazon, and walnuts and pecans. But almonds, hazelnuts, and pistachios are linked with the region. And that also has some reflection in the language because, my sister would say that, for example, she would joke that guys have no brain but two nuts, or you would go and just say just like that, oh, you're nut. And Mars Company released many more products that include caramel, like Snickers, Twix, Milky Way, Rolo, and maybe even some versions of Bounty, although that's typically cocoa nut. And they also release other products, pedigrees, whiskers, and gums, extra Orbit, and Juicy Fruit. So yeah, I think um, caramel is the link. Um, it seems to be like a very remote link, but I don't think that when you call a nun a caramel, that's a woman that's connected with virtue, and a woman that right away brings into your mind the idea that, oh, she can't have sex. I don't know if you have it on your mind when you look at nuns, because I do think about sex when I'm in front of them. I think about their life, and I think, why did they choose that life, and I do that. So I think there is this contrast, because sweets is always something that we want to eat, don't we? Sweet is something that is attractive and seductive in terms of appetite, and appetite is very strongly emphasized in songs like Lady Marmalade, that speaks about Moulin Rouge, the very first strip club ever. So for me, caramelite nuns, the color of Native Americans, and the fact that Native Americans wars were focus on destroying their food supplies. That's mainly corn. And then people who write about them, or people who fight with them, are, Philip Sheridans, so the liquor, or Thomas Burger, that you find at McDonald's burger, right? I think it's a possible, plausible, and also logical connection to make. Um, but of course, that's all. Has to be um, it can be expounded and explained in more detail, and studied even further. But yeah, for today, I think that's it, because I will talk to you next Tuesday. So take care, and thanks for being with me today.